Thank you. I have it written all over here. Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder on this first Sunday in February. My name is Chris Zanoni, and I am very pleased to be your worship leader for today's service. I'm imagining all your lovely faces out there on this beautiful Colorado morning. We welcome all at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. All of you are welcome. All of you are sacred. Whatever your past was like, whatever this present moment is like for you, we invite you to journey into the future together. I have a few announcements to share about upcoming gatherings and groups. Look for the sign-up email later today or follow the link in the chat. Starting this week, join Reverend David and UUC member and therapist Francesca Bini for this 6-week small group focused on naming, holding, honoring, and transforming grief and trauma. Sign up for a Soul Matters Covenant group. New groups are forming now. They meet twice monthly, focusing on a different theme every month. They'll be using materials which include readings and media, as well as thought-provoking questions. This Thursday evening, join Reverend David for an evening to write and reflect on the experience of the Marshall Fire. And finally, at 2 p.m. today, stop by church for an outdoor sing-along with our music director, Deborah. No sign-up needed, just stop by and sing. Welcome all of you who are joining us via the magic of the internet. The chat box will be open if you need to get a message to us. I also invite you to type into the chat box to let us know where you're joining us from, the street or neighborhood, or what city if you're joining us from outside Boulder County. If you are a new online visitor, please email our office administrator, Amy Zen, and let us know how you found us. You will find her email listed on the Zoom chat. Our church website also has a great deal of information about UUCB, our programs, and our activities. Now, please ensure that your microphones remain muted as you join with the others gathered for worship.
I have one more announcement to add, which is a word of gratitude and excitement and change. Amy Zen, our wonderful office administrator, is moving onward to bigger things. She's joining the Unitarian Universalist Association's Transitions Office. Those are the folks who help ministers and congregations. They helped us a lot last year through the search process of connecting and getting settled. I am delighted for her to move onward and upward. And can I invite you to come join in celebrating her next Sunday at 1 o'clock outside here at church. Come have some cake and wish her a fond farewell. Everyone counts and everyone matters. While the gospel stories record Jesus opening a wide door, teaching, healing, and celebrating with a mixed multitude of all sinners and all saints, the churches which claimed his name spent 2 millennia trying to shut the door so that only the people they thought counted could get inside. And to start the day with a history lesson still alive in our culture today, in the 4th century, the Donatists argued that the only real members of the church were those whose lives were without spot or wrinkle. That kind of obsession with purity appears again and again in Christian history. And for that matter, it's there in the history of every other tradition too, and of every secular movement too. It's rooted somewhere in human nature, surely. Our Puritan ancestors weren't exactly Donatists, but they had a pretty stringent sense of who counted as the real church members and who were excluded. Their notion was of a church of visible saints, People, you could tell just from looking at their lives that surely they were among those who God had chosen to save. Their goal was a church composed exclusively of visible saints. And to become a member of one of those early New England Puritan congregations, you had to stand up in front of everyone and give a step-by-step account of how you'd had a personal experience of the saving power of God. And look, that sort of purity church is still around today, though we've moved long past it and hardly have one foot still in the Christian world. But the mission of this congregation, the mission of this community, is not even to vaguely pretend to have a church of visible saints. The call of our universalist tradition is an outright, direct, explicit repudiation of individual purity as the path to salvation. Your private blamelessness will not save you because we're in this life together. This is a church where, in traditional language, we're all sinners and we're all saints. Or in plainer and maybe contemporary language, we're all human beings. And it's rare that I rise to the pulpit to say something is against our beliefs, but a life which looks only to its own personal blamelessness apart from society and others, that's against our beliefs. It denies the reality, the humanity of other people. It denies our interdependence. So gathering for worship today, we disdain the ugly freedom of private purity, and we discard the bitter freedom of private greed, and we disavow the thin freedom of selfishness and self-interest. We embrace instead the great and ever unfinished work, gathering in this community to grow our spirits and help to heal the world. for our story for all ages this morning. Taking advantage of this online format, I have a little help from a friend. So here is the story of the Emperor's New Clothes as told to my dog. Not going?
Yeah, we're not seeing the video. Can you tell it live?
Yeah, I'll tell it live. All right, due to technical difficulties, Pilot the dog will not be making an appearance this morning. It's important that when he does make an appearance, it's online because he would cover this entire room in fur.
I got it, it's just the slides are in the wrong order.
Awesome. Wait, change of plans and good news again.
Never mind.
No, bad.
Not a problem, I just playing it.
Okay,
Sorry.
awesome. Y'all, before I tell you this story, can I just get like 3 cheers for our AV team, who week after week get thrown new and difficult and complicated problems and technologies and weather it all. So big thanks to them. Once upon a time, a very, very far ways away from here, and a time long, long ago, there lived an emperor of a great kingdom, an emperor who wanted to be dressed in the finest clothes that there were. And so his advisors and his tailors dreamed up something. They came to him and held up in front of them nothing that seemed visible whatsoever at all, and described in intricate and astonishing detail the ornaments and the stitching, the weaving of the fabric, the gold and silver threads that were woven in, the jewels that adorned each of the buttons. And despite the emperor not in fact seeing anything there when they held this up, these people had confidence. They sold it. And so finally, having bought into this vision, this dream, this notion of what he was going to wear, and with no one around him to say, hey, there's nothing there, he stripped out of his clothes and he put on the nothing garments, and he buttoned them up carefully, and there, stark naked, but with a great deal of confidence in his appearance, he went out into the city. And riding through the crowds, people kind of looked at each other like, what is going on here? But, I mean, it was the emperor, and all the ceremonial guard and advisors and court was with him, and so they kind of slow clapped it a little bit, and all right, just another weird thing the emperor is doing? Sure, why not? All the way until, on the far side of the city, having processed through, some little kid sitting on their parents' shoulders looked at it and said, that dude's naked. And all of a sudden, everyone started to laugh. Because, I mean, it is sort of hilarious if your emperor is parading naked through the city. And the emperor, too, realized what was going on, how he had been fooled and tricked, and went back home and fired the tailors and learned his lesson, as the whole city did, the story goes, from this one little kid. Now, this is a story I'm sure you've heard and heard many times and in different ways. The thing that strikes me always in telling and retelling this story is when I hear it, I wonder, who am I in that story? Who are you in that story? Because what you want to be, what you're supposed to be, is the hero of the story, is the little kid who observes the truth plain to see in front of them that no one else is mentioning, that everyone else has trained themselves into unconsciousness of. So maybe we're the kid, and sometimes we are. But I also know that sometimes we're the emperor, and someone comes to us with confidence and authority, saying something that seems so clearly not to be true, but nonetheless we go along with, and then everyone else does. And sometimes in that story, I think we're the advisors to the king, to the emperor. You know, we see this man putting on a whole lot of nothing onto his body, and instead of saying what needs to be said, we just keep our mouths shut. And I think sometimes in that story, we're the people in the crowds in the city, slow clapping along the way, or just watching this spectacle unfold, not saying what we know to be true, maybe even not conscious of how bizarre this is, that this is just another weird thing the emperor does. We don't really need to do anything about it. Who are you in that story? Who are any of us and each of us? And to me, that's the challenge to take from it. Not the challenge just to say boldly what the truth is, but instead the more subtle challenge to ask ourselves, where are we in that story as it unfolds in our lives and our world?
If you're joining us online and have a candle or a chalice near your computer, please get ready to light it. I'd like to invite Nicole, deLorimier, to light this morning's chalice.
Good morning. I'm Nicole, deLorimier. So since the fires, I've been volunteering at the Disaster and Donation Center down at Flatirons Mall. It's a huge space. It's the old Nordstrom space. It's got to be 80,000 square feet or bigger. I mean, it's really enormous. There's no training on what to do there. You just walk in, sign in, and then look and see what needs done, and you do it. So, you know, we're busy sorting clothing and arranging things and moving tables around. There's a lot of need there, but it's amazing the amount of clothing, household goods, baby things, and we've got them all categorized in certain areas. It's quite a nice experience for me. So I noticed this middle-aged lady messing with some sweaters and going through them and taking one out and putting it back, and she seemed so indecisive. And then I noticed she was trembling. I could see her body was trembling. And so I thought, I'll make small talk with her. And I said, you know, that one, that orange one there would be pretty, that sweater with your complexion and stuff. That'd be a nice choice for you, I think. And I noticed she had quite a few things. So I said, let me see if I can find you a cart. So I came back, no cart, but I said, I couldn't find a cart. We're so short of them right now, but I found this laundry basket. You could put your items in there if you'd like to. So she couldn't decide whether to take it or not. I could see she was just kind of struggling to be. So let me look at my notes here. I decided not to wear my glasses because I'm still vain at my age. So I have to try to find where I am on my notes. So anyhow, we looked at each other for one long minute, and then it just popped out of my mouth. I didn't plan it or anything. I just said, I know what we need. And she looked at me and said, what? And I said, a hug. So she came over to me and started to hug me, and then she said, she had things in her arms, so she wanted to put them in the basket. And so she said, wait a minute here, I want a real hug. We stood there, two strangers hugging. Sorry. It was pretty emotional for both of us. Anyhow, she could easily have said, and rightfully so, this is a pandemic, I'm not hugging some stranger. But she didn't. Anyhow, I want to light this chalice, so let me see if I can get this thing going here. So I light this chalice as I widen my circle by offering a level of comfort to myself and to another. Thank you.
We now invite all those gathered in your various locations to join together in fellowship and community as we say aloud together our congregation's covenant. We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other, to reach out and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it.
Friends, I invite you into a time of prayer and meditation to settle and to slow down, to listen to yourself and to the world. Will you join me in a deep breath to begin all together? And again, and this time slower, and let out whatever's inside you that needs to be set down. Let that out in this breath. And take a moment to let yourself settle and still. Our words for meditation are by the poet Marge Percy, who writes this called The Low Road. What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up. They can bust you. They can break your fingers. They can burn your brain with electricity, blur you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything that you can't stop them from doing. How do you stop them? Alone, you can fight. You can refuse. You can take what revenge you can, but they'll roll over you. But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake dancing file can break any cordon. An army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people are a delegation. Three people are a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. 12 make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity and your own newspaper. 10,000 power. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again and they say no. It starts when you say we and you know who you mean. And every day you mean one more. We'll be together in silence for 7 breaths. Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the care of this congregation. We recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love and compassion and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. We stand at the side of parents and teachers and all those whose spiritual practice is caring for children. We're with those who live with grief, with chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental disability, with addiction. We're with you. For our neighbors in prison, and those who care for family members in ill health, those who are struggling to stay afloat in the midst of poverty, we are with you. We are you. Our lives are blessed by those who knowingly and with courage and curiosity face their final days. And we pray for those in harm's way, hoping for wisdom and strength in the leaders of the world, and for us, that the people of this congregation, that we together live into our longing to build a more just world. I invite you, as the music continues, to type the names of those you'd like to lift up into the chat, to share a joy, a sorrow, the thing that's heavy on your heart or the thing that lifts you up. For all these blessings and concerns, and those that we hold silently, thank you for the ways that you bless each other.
What's that song singing in my soul? What's that song singing in my soul? What's that song singing in my soul? Keep on singing in my soul. Song of change, sing
having good intentions as individuals doesn't mean you actually live it out all the time, and the same goes for organizations. Having good values as an organization doesn't automatically guarantee we can live them out. And to demonstrate that, here are the 4 core values of Enron, an enormous company in the 90s that turned incredible profits on paper because they basically lied about their losses. Their 4 core values were respect, integrity, communication, and excellence. Having good values as an organization, whether it's printed out for investors or listed on a church website, it doesn't automatically mean we actually live them out. At the General Assembly in 2017, the annual gathering of Unitarian Universalists from around the country who get together to connect and to learn and to do the business of our association, this democratic denomination. At General Assembly in 2017, the association's Board of Trustees announced and chartered the Commission on Institutional Change. The charge was given to conduct an audit of the power structure and analyze systemic racism and white supremacy culture within the Unitarian Universalist Association. In other words, the board said, we have this really beautiful set of values as an organization articulated in our 7 principles and elsewhere, but are we practicing what we're preaching? How are we living up or failing to live up to our stated values around racial justice? These sort of commissions to investigate deeply some particular aspect of our denominational practice, that approach isn't new. And of course, our institutions, just exactly like us, don't live up to their best selves. Without attention paid to it, the status quo perpetuates itself. You don't get different results by doing the same thing. The status quo continues, and it's easy to go along with the crowd of 10,000 when the emperor has no clothes. So the charge to the commission wasn't to investigate and understand racists, but to look at systemic racism, to ask whether our congregations and our association treat white folks as if they matter more than people of color. And that sort of systemic racism they're looking at, it's not about purposeful racist decisions. It's not about intentional bigotry. It's about what are the side effects of our organizational culture. The board, in essence, said we need to ask if the way we actually act and live in this faith tradition matches the values that we say we have. We swim in the waters of a deeply racist country, a country that treats black and brown lives as if they matter less than white lives. It stands to reason then that that shows up in our congregations. If we take seriously the notion that we live in a country profoundly shaped and influenced, past and present, by race and racism, the arena for that conversation is not merely school boards and the public square. It's also in our own institutions. Why, in the face of real advancement and sincere efforts around issues of diversity and inclusion, do we still experience crises and problems, situations when it's just not working? Well, the commission spent 3 years in conversation with more than 1,100 Unitarian Universalists. They called for testimony from individuals who told stories about how racism has affected their experience as UUs. They convened focus groups at general assemblies and regional and district meetings and meetings of professional associations and online, including a focus group of people who had concerns about this anti-oppression work. They hired consultants to review key organizational documents. They conducted multiple surveys. They analyzed 650 pages of transcripts and 80 hours of interviews. And among their conclusions, they reported the vast majority of people of color and others from identities marginalized within Unitarian Universalism had experienced discriminatory and oppressive incidents or cultures within Unitarian Universalist circles. And they continued, religious professionals feel these aggressions and attacks on dignity most frequently and most strongly. Those who are white had a spectrum of experiences ranging from denial that any kind of racism existed within Unitarian Universalism. Direct quote from one person, "We have a 0% occurrence." That spectrum. To, on the other hand, those who saw clear issues with equity and inclusion and diversity and paid a large cost professionally and socially to name them. The vast majority of people were in the middle, vaguely aware, somewhat committed, feeling unskilled. Even so, the commission found that many Black and Indigenous and people of color chose not to participate because of prior experiences with information gathering like this that led to little change, as well as the barriers posed by the large number of people, employed and lay, whose experiences have already led them to leave our association. They say we quickly learned that people were reluctant to share their stories. One reason was that religious professionals feared losing their jobs or their ability to perform their jobs, as did those who identified as white allies. Another reason was that people of color, whether professional or lay, felt they had told their stories again and again, reliving pain and traumatic experience to no end. Over and over, they report, we heard from people who said they were no longer willing to describe the pain they experienced, because after the initial shock and reaction took place, little changed. Some describe this as a form of trauma porn, in which those in the majority culture got a voyeuristic look into the lives of Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, and experienced deep emotions in the engagement with that, and failed to act in any systemic way. All of that's the background, the reflection, the information that led them to publish 117 recommendations on change, based on an analysis of theology and governance, congregations and community, hospitality, inclusion, living our values in the world, religious professionals, education for liberation, innovation and risk-taking, reparations, restoration, accountability. It's a lot. There's a lot there. And one consultant suggested, look, our experience is that if an organization or an institution wants to learn a few concepts or become aware of some things that had been previously unaware of, a training or two might suffice. But this denomination is on a path to improve the racial and cultural climate in the organization as a whole. And such a goal requires consistent effort over time to impact all the individual and interpersonal levels as well as the institutional and cultural. It's heavy stuff. It is a lot. But here's the thing, why so much focus on anti-racism in our association? Why so much communication and articles and sermons? Because the way forward for genuine change requires a different way of being. It requires us first to become aware of the water that we're swimming in. Why so many concrete recommendations? 117? Well, because long experience suggests we would much rather think about things than act on them. It's like the old higher education joke, never mind how it works in practice. Tell me how it works in theory. The Commission's charge, our charge, and the one we've taken up in this congregation, is not to do everything or to get it all right, but to do the work of becoming. For the last few years, reaffirmed at the board retreat a couple weeks ago, one of the goals here in this congregation has been to continue to build a community of inclusivity, including learning about white supremacy culture and counteracting it within and beyond the congregation. That's been the impulse that led to the anti-racism learning groups last year. It was underneath the work we did as a staff team, creating shared values for how we work together. It's behind our partnership with people of color-led initiatives like Teepee Raisers, who lead the trips to Pine Ridge. We're doing this bit by bit, living into and up to our values, conscious of our shortcomings, and in fact, hoping to become more conscious of them, but not stuck, not paralyzed by our awareness of that. I'm conscious reading through this report, and it's available online if you want to dig into it. I'm conscious of my own reaction to the magnitude of it, the sheer number of recommendations. But then that's fight or flight or freeze. The work isn't to do everything at once. It's to go steadily onward. The poet Philip Booth says, how you get there is where you arrive. How you get there is where you arrive. Elsewhere, the Commission writes that the work of becoming more equitable and inclusive and diverse within our congregations is justice work. And if we can't do this well in our own house, we can't be effective as justice partners. And I read that the work of becoming is justice work, with such emphasis on the work of becoming. Now, it's easy to misunderstand what they're saying here as something like, well, we can't be effective justice partners until we have finished becoming more equitable and inclusive and diverse at home. We can't be effective in the public square until our own house is spotless, without spot or wrinkle. But that is very much not the point. What makes us effective partners is the becoming. It's our willingness to look at the work we ourselves have to do and then to start doing it. Our mission to grow our souls, to help to heal the world in community, that mission, that's which is only one way of saying it, that's not an end point. That's not there's not a threshold where you've grown enough. There's not a threshold where, well, the world's healed enough. No, always onwards we go. No one retires from growth, and no one's too young. Seek to understand before seeking to be understood is old advice and almost entirely ignored in online argument. But seeking to understand is an urgent task. And I say that especially for white folks here in Boulder County, living in a context where people of color are few and far between, first on the census, and then secondly, on the ground here in this city. Our work is to seek to understand. Our work is to say, well, maybe we don't know what's going on here. Our work is to say maybe the assumptions and the expectations, the reasons and the stories that we've told ourselves for why this county is the way that it is, maybe those things aren't right. Maybe we don't know. The Commission on Institutional Change writes that research reveals today we can barely speak to each other across generations and socioeconomic location. They say, look, terms such as white supremacy culture have dramatically different meanings across generations. In today's world, it's easy to stay in our comfort zone. It's easy to stay inside communities and communication channels designed to reinforce our opinion so that we have less and less common language among us. And that's true for us as Unitarian Universalists as well. If the phrase white supremacy culture does not sit well with you, it is so easy not to learn what it means. It's so easy to seek out, why is this a bad phrase? Why should we not use it? Instead of seeking out, why is this used? Why is there a generation of activists who are using this language? Why is this the language that's being preached at pulpits around this country? Why? Why? You don't have to find that out. But the work is to say, why? The work is to find it out, even though the world makes it easy not to. The commission continues, we must enter into some negotiation to understand that while we may not use the same words to describe the issues, we must have a shared commitment to the work of building a more diverse and equitable and inclusive faith. This is the scary work of saying out loud, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what this means. I don't know how it shows up in front of me. I don't know if the stories I've always told myself about how the culture operates are real, are true. That's the becoming, and there is no becoming a justice-seeking people without first saying, I don't know. Thomas Kuhn, in his book on the structure of scientific revolutions, says the beginning of all change, the beginning of any change, starts in recognizing the insufficiency, the inadequacy of the model with which we engage the world. Only then does the work begin of looking for a new model that can better describe and explain and account for what we experience. We can only move forward recognizing that something's gone wrong in the existing paradigm. And that is spiritual work, as well as just educational work. It's not just about learning. It's not just about acquiring facts about what's going on outside our doors. It's spiritual work because it's the work of humility. It's the work of saying, maybe I don't know. It's the work of mindfulness, the work of paying attention. It's the work of curiosity and humility, mindfulness, and curiosity. Well, we know those are the hallmarks of our spiritual lives already. Just as much, those are the hallmarks of all of our lives. There are things that we know we don't know, and then there are things we don't know that we don't know. Humility, mindfulness, and curiosity is the entryway, the space, the door to walk through and say, I don't know where I'm going exactly, but I recognize the inadequacy of the stories that I've told for how the world works, and that it's time to learn new stories. Amen.
to run this race in vain. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain.
This month, our offering goes to SPAN, the Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence. I'd like to welcome Development Associate Laura Montoya to tell us more about SPAN.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Laura, and I'm here to tell you a little bit more about Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence, or SPAN. SPAN is a human rights organization serving Boulder and Broomfield counties that has been around since 1979. So 43 strong years committed to ending violence against adults, youth, and children through support, advocacy, organizing, and education. We provide support to survivors of domestic violence and their children through the various services we provide, such as our crisis line and shelter, our counseling program, transitional housing program, legal advocacy, and anti-violence education. One example of a special program that SPAN provides is through our housing program, and it is called the Economic Empowerment Program, or EEP. This is meant to act as a sort of mentorship program, helping survivors learn life skills such as learning how to get into the workforce and be more self-sufficient, which they may have been isolated from in the past. This can include teaching them how to save money, how to create a bank account, perhaps how to apply for college, how to create a resume. Another example of a program offered by SPAN is our Peers Building Justice program, or PBJ. This was created by our education team, and it is how our education team serves and supports students in Boulder Valley School District, middle and high school students. They go into classrooms and teach students how to engage in healthy relationships, challenge gender stereotypes, recognize abusive relationships, understand consent, and how to be a supportive friend. So that's just a little bit more about Safe House. Please learn more at our website if you feel so inclined, safehousealliance.org. And thank you again so much for choosing SPAN for your Share Our Plate. We really appreciate the support of UUCB, and thank you for supporting survivors and their children.
Thank you, Laura. I invite you to give as generously as you are able. You can make a donation now using the link posted in our chat, by sending a check to UUCB, or scanning the QR code on the next slide with your mobile phone. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to the Boulder community.
Friends, our worship ends and our service begins again. Go out into this bright world with these helpful words on your lips. I don't know. Amen.
Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way. Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way.
I invite you to stay with us in our Zoom rooms for a time of online fellowship and discussion. Fred and Barb will tell us more about how that will work.